On this episode of the Sports Opinions Podcast, I had the pleasure of talking to six-time Ironman Triathlon World Champion Mark Allen as we discussed some of his great career moments, performance-enhancing drugs in sports, and a first on the Sports Opinions Podcast, the sport of surfing. Really think you'll enjoy this one. And without any further ado, cue the intro. What's up, sports fans, and welcome to the Sports Opinions Podcast. I'm your host, as always, Alex Cuesta, and with me today is a guy that has more accolades under his belt than I am hoping to accrue in like 6 lifetimes. He is a 6-time Ironman Triathlete World Champion, was voted the greatest endurance athlete of all time on a worldwide poll conducted by ESPN in 2012. He's the co-author of Fit Soul, Fit Body, 9 Keys to a Healthier, Happier You, and currently coaches triathletes in over 50 countries around the world through markallencoaching.com. He is one of the idols and one of the biggest athletes to ever come out of endurance sports. Mark Allen, how are you, Mark?
Hey, great to be here, Alex.
That's
quite an intro.
Listen, with a man with a lot of accolades, you got to give him out. You can't shortchange the great things that you've done in your career.
You know, when I was a kid, I was. You know how it was when you were at school and you had 2 team captains and all the kids in the class would line up and they were picking, one person for each side to put a team together for whether it was softball or whatever you were playing. Mm-hmm. I was like the last guy who always got picked because when I was younger, there was no foreshadowing that I had any kind of, real athletic ability. I mean, I love sports, but I was, like I said, I was the last person that they would pick to be on the softball team or the basketball team or whatever. So you never know how things are going to turn out for you.
Yeah, it's always interesting. And endurance athletes are definitely a different breed because I ran, it's known if you listen to this podcast, I ran at Marist College. I did do some cross country in high school, and distance runners are just different where your typical organized athletes or your sprinters are your prototypical athletes. A lot of your distance runners and your endurance athletes are your straight A honor roll students that are twigs. And for the most part, look like they'd get blown away in the wind. And then you put them on a course, on a track, on like a triathlon start line, and this beast comes out in them. And it's like, whoa, they had that in them. That's insane.
I think endurance athletics, I mean, every sport requires focus for sure. But I think just the training that you have to do for endurance athletics, it's a lot of hours, or it can be a lot of hours. And so, if I think it lends itself to people who kind of have that ability to just sort of lock in with a focus and stay on track with it. So, if I'm training for Ironman and I've got a 5-hour bike ride on the weekend or whatever I'm doing, you can't be 30 minutes into it and go, gee, I wish this thing was over. You got to you got to stay with it. And that requires a certain amount of focus. And I don't know if that is also how you might characterize people who, let's say, do better in school or whatever. But yeah, for sure endurance athletes have a certain mindset that's probably different than, say, a sprinter or a gymnast or something like that. And so, but that's the cool thing about sports, is that for everybody there's a sport that's gonna kind of be good for them, And that's what I found when I got into triathlon. That was the one for me.
So I'm going to ask you, because it just popped in my head, because I am a big fan of track and field. I'm a big fan of endurance athletics in general. And all the time, most of the time, you hear that the decathlon champion is considered the best athlete in the world. Mm-hmm. Now, I want to put to you, being a triathlon world champion multiple times over, would you consider a triathlon Ironman champion the best athlete in the world, or on par with that decathlon champion?
I think, and I've always said this, that anybody who's at the top of their sport is on par with pretty much anybody else who's at the top of a different sport. The skills might be different, the genetic makeup is going to be different, the mindset might be different, but what it takes to be at the top, if you're the best or one of the best in your sport, you're on par with any other athlete that's world class. Of course, if you're a triathlete, or let's say you ride the Tour de France, or you're doing something that's very endurance oriented, maybe it looks like, wow, that person has more athletic ability than somebody who's doing a 100-meter sprint. But clearly, it's just a different skill set, different mindset, different training, and a different way of focusing when you're actually in your event. But it takes kind of the same stuff on a very basic level to get there.
Now, I got to give a shout out to one of my former athletes. I coached for a few years over at my alma mater, Marist College, and one of our most prolific sprinters, he was a 100, 200, 400-meter runner. Tim Johnson just became an Ironman over in Lake Placid. He completed the Lake Placid Ironman. So I have to give him a shout out on the show, because that's, I think it's an accomplishment when anyone has that title Ironman next to them.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's world champion Ironman or just Ironman, it's something that you're going to carry with you for the rest of your life. And I have to start off with asking you, when did you begin to fall in love with endurance sports? Were you a cross-country runner? Were you an avid long-distance swimmer, biker? When did you really start this love with going, you know what? I don't want to stop with just running 5-6 miles. I want to go 14, 15 on a run and go enjoy a 2-hour long run instead of a typical 40, 50-hour long run.
When I was a kid, I was a competitive swimmer growing up from the time I was 10 all the way through university. And so I had a swimming background. My best events were 100 and 200-yard backstroke. And so, I was swimming for anywhere from a minute to 2 minutes, and that was it. And anything beyond that, I thought was like crazy. To 500 meter, 1500, forget it. That was just not in my mindset. I thought, why would anybody want to go that long? However, in 1982, I was actually 2 years out of college, and at that point in that time, I kind of thought, okay, I'm done with swimming. I was pretty mediocre as a swimmer. Anything I do beyond this in my life athletically is going to be way worse than anything I did in this sport that I'd done for 12 years. So I was 24. I saw the Ironman on television, and it was on Wide World of Sports. I mean, you probably remember those days when, the entire nation would stop to hear what Jim McKay had to say about some incredible sporting event. Well, it was in February 1982. I turned on Wide World of Sports, and here is this thing that he was saying it's called the Ironman, which I'd never heard of. I didn't know even what a triathlon was. And he was explaining the distances. He said, it's on the big island of Hawaii. This is a world championship. It's a 2.4-mile open ocean swim, followed by a 112-mile bike ride, followed by a marathon, 26.2 miles. And I'm thinking, how many friggin' days is it going to take these people to finish this thing? And he, of course he says, they're starting at 7 a.m, and the last person has to finish by midnight, 17 hours later. And I thought, there's no way. But I watched these just seemingly ordinary looking people crossing that extraordinary finish line. And it just triggered something in me. And a couple of weeks later, I thought, you know what? I want to just go there and see if I can cross that finish line. And that's really how it started. And in the beginning, I'll never forget the very first bike ride I went on was with a friend of mine who was a cyclist, and he got me set up. We went to a bike shop, bought a used bike for $500, and, I was off and going. And we rode 35 miles. And, 35 miles isn't 112, but I had never really ridden a bike before. And when I was done with that ride, every part of my body hurt so bad. I thought, there is no way I can do this sport. But and you know how this is, Alex. You start with something and you just start putting those little foundational blocks in place that are building that foundation that will get you to that goal that you're after. And, after about a month of training, all of a sudden I started to feel like, wow, maybe maybe I will be able to finish this race. And it just started building from there. And then it just became this really fun puzzle to put together. Like, how can I get a little bit more out of my body than I did yesterday or last month or last year? And it, that simple goal to cross the finish line ended up turning into a 15-year career professionally for me.
And it's just a fantastic career that you had. And even though the Ironman, you noticed it when you did at the age of 24 on the Worldwide of Sports, it's no secret that you winning your 6 back-to-back and that whole entire, I think you had one in between that you didn't win, but you won 5 back-to-back and then one after. But just your 6 world titles really put a spotlight on the Ironman and made it bigger and more prolific to just the average person who, except for that one day on Wide World of Sports, would pay attention a little more to triathlons in general. And you also had an unbelievable 2-year streak of 21 straight wins at the ultra endurance level, which isn't not just marathon, but plus. What was that phase of your career with just all those wins, all those Ironmans piling up? What was that phase in your career like where, you were almost untouchable? You were probably the greatest athlete on the planet of all time that didn't get the big notoriety that you probably deserved.
People see they see those 6 wins, or they read about it and go, wow, that's pretty amazing. And so those are just 6 moments in time that people see, but they didn't come automatically. The first 6 years that I raced at the Ironman, I didn't win. I was second twice, I was third once, I was 5th twice. One time my derailleur broke on my bike and I was forced out of the race, even though I was in the lead at the moment when that happened. But so, I had 6 years where I was looking like I had the potential to win it, but I was falling short. I could be in the lead at the end of the bike. I could be in the lead halfway through the marathon. I could be in the lead with just a few miles to go in the marathon, but I always kept getting past. I would fall apart and I didn't have it. And that was probably the biggest challenge for me, was each year trying to decide, am I going to pick up the pieces and go back one more time? And if I am, what am I going to change to make the performance be what my dream is? And the dream was to try to become the Ironman champion. And, so it's, everybody has a story, right? I mean, nobody just wakes up one morning and they're a world champion. It takes years of putting those pieces in place, refining your training, figuring out where the weak points are in your character too. Like in the Ironman, even in the 6 that I won, there were just hundreds and hundreds of moments where it started to feel really so difficult and hard to keep going that it's like, I don't even know if I'm going to finish this thing.
You have a lot of time to think during an Ironman.
You have too much time to think. Yeah. I mean, for me, completing an Ironman takes a little over 8 hours, and that's a long time to stay on task with something. And so, I had to figure out how do I manage simple emotions that we all have, like fear. Somebody starts pulling away, they're stronger looking than you are. All of a sudden you feel like the victory is going to slip away, and it can bring up that self-doubt or that fear. And then you get that mind chatter going that's like, I can't do it. I didn't do the right kind of training. I should.
Your legs feel heavy and your shoulders get droopy, and all of that starts to happen.
Yeah. And so one of the big things that I ended up really practicing was just getting my mind to be quiet, because when you can kind of like just take that breath and just go, okay, then when you do that, you just accept that this is going to be maybe harder than you thought, and you start to deal with it, you start to manage it, and you re-engage in what you're doing. And when your mind is quiet, then you don't have to be telling yourself anything to keep going, because you're just on task. You're just, it's like you become this moving piece of athletic art, kind of. And it's, people talk about being in that flow. And I knew when I was in that space, because there's mile markers on the road. And when I was really in that quiet place, it would seem like 10 minutes went by, but I had covered 10 miles. when I was out of that space and the mind chatter was going, 10 minutes, and I realized I'd only gone 1 mile, and so
Yeah.
that was kind of one of the big elements of me being able to do what I did, was just getting into that quiet space as much as I could during the event, practicing it in training every single day.
So now I have to ask, how much was yoga and meditation and things like that important to somebody in your sport, where the ultra endurance, where you are going for not just minutes, hours on end? Is that an important piece to, like you said, getting your mind right? And is that something that you'd recommend to every single athlete, regardless of whether they're going for hours or not, just that mindfulness that you gain through yoga, meditation, and things of the like?
Yeah, for me, that was just as big a part of my training as the swim, bike, and run. And I met a gentleman, Brant Secunda, who we ended up writing that book that you mentioned, Fit Soul, Fit Body, together. And he teaches a tradition that comes from one of the native peoples in Mexico, the Huichols, and the Huichol people. And a lot of what that tradition practices is getting your mind to be quiet, trusting in yourself, developing a relationship with the natural world, which is like, here I am, I'm in Hawaii on the Big Island. That is one of the most powerful places in nature I have ever been. And so, he helped me to actually go there and instead of trying to hide from the sun and the wind and the heat and the humidity, to just embrace that and to see that raw lava that created that whole island as not a hell, but as a paradise of just this place of potential where I can really put out something that has a lot of meaning for me. And so, I did a lot of retreats with him throughout the year as part of my preparation to get ready for all of my races. And I continue to study with him today, and it's just a great way to get your internal environment in the right place, because as I'm sure you have seen, Alex, there's a lot of people who, they're stars in training, but then when the competition hits, something in them cracks and they can't hold themselves together. And it's an emotional thing. It's how you deal with negative emotions on the spot. Nobody goes through an Ironman 8 hours feeling confident all the way. I always tell people that sort of pumped up self-confidence, like, yeah, I'm going to get this thing this year. That has a shelf life of about 3 hours in Kona in the Ironman. And after that, you're just raw. And all of a sudden you just go, whoa, okay, now I realize what I got myself into one more time. And so you just have to be quiet within that. And that's what Brant really helped me to do.
I wish I had that in college, because I had a big phase of that where I would just train. Unbelievable. I trained with a lot of our top guys, and then when I hit the track, I couldn't do it. So I wish that I had someone there to help me do that, because I feel like if I would have picked up more meditation and yoga, it would have definitely helped me. I have to ask right now where you stand. You've done a lot of endurance stuff, and we've been told millions of times that the human body is not meant to do all of this really intensive marathon, ultra marathon, Ironmans. What is your body like right now? Is it physically still in good shape? Are you starting to feel the ailments of doing? You did 90 plus races and you won 60 plus of them. Am I correct?
Yes.
So you participated in a lot over a short period of time. How are you feeling right now?
I feel great, and I'll explain why. When I did a lot of my training in Boulder, Colorado, and that's sort of a hub of endurance athletics. There's a lot of cyclists and world-class runners and world-class triathletes, and I had seen a lot of the top people in all those different sports push it too many years to the point where their body did start to pay a price. They got injured, they ended up getting burned out, they would get sick a lot or whatever. And then all of a sudden, they're trying to maintain that top level and their body's just revolting against it. And I thought, you know what? One of my main goals is to retire from that peak level competition before I go over that edge. And so in 1995, I knew going into the Ironman that would be my final Ironman. I was 37 years old at that point. And then that was the last Ironman I did, and there's not a day that I look back and think, gee, I wish I'd done another one, because I did retire healthy. I don't have any joint problems. I exercise every day still. I'm 61. When I competed, I weighed 160 pounds. Now at age 61, I weigh 160 pounds, exactly the same body weight as I did when I competed. Of course, the composition's a little bit different, but and I just can see that endurance athletics is fine to do in small doses, let's say, but if you do it too many races, too hard, you train too hard all the time, and you keep pushing too hard, there can be some prices that you'll pay. But if you keep it in balance, you take long off seasons, don't do a lot more sort of aerobic training that's just moderate as opposed to really high-end intensity, the human body responds really well to it. Let me put it this way, we're the best endurance athletes on the planet. There's an event called the Western States 100, and it's in the Sierra Nevadas. They have two events. One is for people, and the other is with horses. And the world record for a person running 100 miles is about a half hour faster than the record for the horses running 100 miles.
Wow.
So we're put together to be endurance athletes. So it's something that our genetics evolved around to do, just with our Achilles and the way that works with energy return and all this stuff, being upright. But again, it's like anything. A little of something good is great. If you do too much of it, it can push you in the opposite direction.
Now, bringing up, talking about your physical shape, it really is a good segue into something you feel strongly about, and that is PEDs in sports, steroids, HGH, any performance-enhancing drugs. I think we both feel the same way where we're against it. One of the main issues is, and it always seems to be for whatever reason, the drugs are a step ahead of the testing. And I don't know if that's willful ignorance by the leagues that want to keep these athletes on top and keep records breaking, or if it's just that good. And we both know that me being in love with track, you being an endurance athlete, it is rampant in our two major sports. Mm-hmm. PEDs are awful. Blood doping is big in track, and I'm pretty sure people are still doing it, even though it is tested. It's really hard to, I think, draw the line where someone might be looking at life-changing money if they could just get to this next level, and maybe using that PED will get them there. It's for me as an athlete and for me as a competitor, I never even thought about doing it. I always wanted to do it the right way. Mm-hmm. But there is the weird side of me that sees that other side. How do you feel about the whole entire PEDs and everything that has to go in sports?
Yeah, I mean, it's an unfortunate thing that we have to deal with. And it's probably, I don't know what to equate it to in the regular world. I don't know if it's like cheating on your taxes or whatever, but maybe. There was a point early in my career when somebody came to me and they said, look, I think that some of your competitors are doing something. Maybe it's blood doping or something, because some of their performances aren't making sense. And the person who said this said, if you want, there's somebody that I can have you talk to, and you can just decide if this is something you want to do. And I thought about it, and I go, you know what? First of all, it's illegal. Second of all, if I take a drug and I win, then there's no way that mentally I would be able to win again without taking more drugs. And I thought, I don't want to do that. It's not worth it to me to do that level of what I consider to be cheating just to win, because I'm going to have to live with myself the rest of my life. And so let's say I win the Ironman because I take some drugs, take something, whatever. For the rest of my life, when people say, that's amazing, you won the Ironman, there would be a part of my brain that would be saying, I won it, but I did it because I took these drugs. Of course, I trained, but I took these drugs, and that's how I did it. And I didn't want to live with that. Maybe I have too much of a conscience about my life, but the testing, I think it's good that we keep trying to prevent it from happening. It's like, you got to have certain laws that have consequences if you get caught, and that'll help keep it in check somewhat, and it'll keep sending the message that it's probably not it's not a real fair way to compete with your fellow athletes, but it really won't stop until there's a mass culture within athletics where the athletes themselves will not tolerate it. If you're in a competition with somebody, and there's 50 of you and 49 of you know that you're not taking something, and 49 of you know that that one person is taking something, they're going to be blackballed, and they're not going to like that. And so unless there's a true culture of not accepting PEDs within each of the sports, it'll keep going on. Some people will always want to cheat. They'll want that step up. I won't get caught, and I'll win this, and then I'll get sponsorship, and then I'll be famous. And it's like, but I think you have to keep trying.
Yeah, I agree. I hate the fact that PEDs, steroids, and all the type of things they're in sports, but I will give you another end of the coin. The raw basic purpose of sport is essentially entertainment. And that is really the way, we are, as athletes, we are there to use our physical abilities to entertain our fans and people that enjoy watching our sport.
Mm-hmm.
In that coin, I've heard people just say, legalize it. If these athletes want to destroy their own bodies and they want to sit there and they want to make their money in quick terms, but destroy themselves, kill themselves, it is what it is. Who are we to stop them? It's entertaining us. It's, and that's the sole purpose. Why don't we just let them do it? Where are you on that term of, if they want to do it, it's their freedom. Let's just legalize everything and get entertained.
I've heard that argument a lot, of course, and I think let's say like in the early days of cycling, that was the culture. Like, let those guys do whatever they want. We love this entertainment. We love seeing these guys just go at it for 21 days and do these amazing things in the Tour de France. But for every athlete that will want to take something, there's hundreds of thousands that want to compete at the best level, but they won't ever be competitive if they don't take the drugs, and they don't want to take the drugs. So I think it might make the entertainment value more. I don't know. What would Ironman athletes look like if they were all on as much drugs as they could pump in their bodies? Who knows? They might look like creatures from another planet. But yeah, I just think it's nice for people who don't take drugs to at least feel like they don't want to do it, but they can still try to be one of the best. That's what I did in the sport. I became one of the best. I never took drugs. And so I can walk away and my conscience is completely clean. So.
And also, I think there's a moral conversation to be had here because, yeah, there's the entertainment, the intrinsic value of us watching and getting entertained by, all these amazing athletes who were amazing athletes and then became super athletes by using drugs, if that became the case.
Mm-hmm.
But it does eventually destroy their bodies. It is abnormal to be putting it back in. And it's kind of like, in a really like kind of terrible analogy, but putting two pit bulls against each other just for entertainment, knowing that one of them is probably going to kill the other one. The other one's going to be extremely injured from it. We're getting entertainment. We're gambling on it because sports betting's massive. But in the end, we're just watching two things destroy each other. There has to be a moral ground when it comes to PEDs and steroids where we kind of have to, I don't want to police anyone because I do believe everyone has the right to do whatever the hell they want in a way. But at the same time, they're doing it in order to get that check in and to entertain us. And for me, I don't want to see people destroying themselves just so I can see an extra touchdown thrown. I'm not down for that. Yeah.
And the thing that's happening, at least in a lot of endurance sports, is that it's not just restricted to the top pros. Age group athletes are taking stuff too. And, so let's say you have somebody who's 50 or 55 or 60 years old, and they go to the longevity clinic and they get their blood tested, and of course their testosterone is going to be lower than somebody who's 25, and so the doctor gives them testosterone and a few other things, and all of a sudden this 58 or 60-year-old athlete is performing, like they would have 30 years ago. That is, to me, that's like almost even more crazy, because these folks they're not getting contracts, they're not winning money. It's just purely for their own ego to be able to win races. And I get into this conversation a lot, and I say, that's why we have age groups, because as we get older, our bodies change. And if we're supplementing with all the stuff that slowly gets produced less and less in our bodies naturally as we age, then why even have age groups?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, definitely. So I think it's something that the conversation still needs to be had, but overall, I think that PEDs they don't have a place in sports in general. I just think that they're dangerous, not only for injury's sake of actual physical stuff, but in terms of the people. But a sport that I don't know has PEDs in it, and I thought was really cool when you mentioned to me, was one of your favorite sports, surfing. You don't hear many people talk about the sport of surfing. And I think the sport of surfing has been shortchanged a lot, because I thought when ESPN did the X Games, I thought eventually they were going to elaborate into the water sports area, which they never really did. And I just think that I grew up on the Jersey Shore in New Jersey. I'm in Poughkeepsie right now, but I grew up on the Jersey Shore, so I have familiarity with surfing. And it is one of the coolest sports in a way, because unlike other sports where everything is set, in skateboarding, there's set ramp heights. In football, there's set rules. Surfing has rules, but yeah, you might know that the swells are from 8 to 10 feet today, but you never know which wave you're going to get when you actually jump up there. So just because you're hitting this wave, and yeah, when it was coming, when I saw them coming in, it looked like it was going to be a good one. You could be trying to do something on a 10-foot wave, and all of a sudden it stops at 7, and then what? It's such a different sport. When did you start to fall in love with surfing, and do you surf?
I started surfing in high school, and that's actually my go-to sport. It has been really since I quit competition. I live in Santa Cruz, California. I'm 2 blocks from one of the main breaks here, and so I can just walk down, paddle out, and it's great because it's cardio. It's like yoga. You're moving and stretching in every direction. It's time in nature, so it's complete stress relief and quieting my mind. And it's time, with the guys out there that I like to hang out with and be in the water with. And so I love it because it just feels like it's really healthy for my body. It's a good workout, keeps it loose, keeps me fit. And like you said, every single wave is different. So they say it's one of the harder balance sports because the terrain that you're actually balancing on is moving. Like you said, like if you're skiing, the mountain isn't moving. It's hopefully stationary. But yeah, hopefully. But in the water, that the wave is always moving, and every single wave breaks a little bit differently. And so I think it also really helps keep your mind flexible and pliable because, when you run, let's say as an example, your body can kind of get in a rut. Like you have the same stride length, you have the same foot plant patterning, your muscles move in the same way. And over time, that's how you get efficient, is you do the same thing over and over and over. But at the same time, things can kind of wear down because you're only using a certain part of your makeup. When you're surfing, every single wave is different. So your mind is having to always kind of learn a little bit with each wave that you take. And, I can really feel there's a difference in my mental acuity and freshness before and after I go out surfing. And I really think there's something to that. It's kind of my fountain of youth at the moment that I love to do every day. And one of the greatest in the sport at this point anyway is Kelly Slater, who he's 47 years old and he's still competing on the world tour. And it's, I don't know any other sport where somebody is that old and is still at the top of world class. It's amazing.
Yeah. First off, I got to say that I'm jealous that you're over in paradise every day. So that's one way to stay young too, is hanging out in paradise every day. But yeah, definitely surfing is just such a unique sport in the sense too, also where I grew up on the Jersey Shore, like I said, and at any moment you can have decent waves, calm, high tide, up to rip waves in a matter of minutes.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just a completely change, and that has to be something accounted for in surfing. And you mentioned Kelly Slater, 11-time world champion, 47 years old, still, ranked number one in the world, if not right in the top 5 often. Should he be on the mantle of the greatest athletes of all time? With the Tiger Woods, with the Michael Jordans, with yourself? Should he be up there?
Absolutely. And part of it is because he's won, just his longevity, he's won world championship titles in 3 different decades. He was the youngest winner of the world title in surfing, and he's also the oldest. And just to have that longevity is really, really, I mean, you talk about Tom Brady, and there's plenty of other people in different sports who have been around for a long time, but I don't think anybody can come close to what Kelly Slater has achieved. Yeah.
Yeah, he's unbelievable, absolutely unbelievable. Another name you mentioned was John Florence, who, I would be remiss to say that I pay attention to surfing enough to really know who anyone is. But you mentioned that when he's on his game, he's one of the best. How old is John Florence? Is he someone that could take over Kelly Slater's mantle if he ever gets consistent?
Yeah, I don't know if he'll win 11 world titles. He's won some already. He grew up in Hawaii on the North Shore, and he can, when they're in competition and the waves are big and unruly and look like something that I wouldn't even want to touch, he's out there making it look like it's a 3-foot wave that he's just manhandling, and he has that sense of where to be at the right time, how to manage that much power, and it's truly impressive. I mean, Kelly Slater is amazing, but some of the stuff that John does is on these really less than perfect big giant waves in competition is just mind blowing. It's just cool to see. I love any sport when I'm looking at the people who are the very best at it, because when somebody is the best that they can be, and maybe they're even going beyond anything that they've done before, you can feel like there's this energy that they're tapped into and that they're flowing and it's working, and it really is like, it's like listening to a symphony or watching somebody sculpt this amazing piece out of rock or whatever it is. It's like I think it really sets up something that helps all of us go, you know what, I could never do that, but maybe, just maybe, I could finish an Ironman, or maybe I could learn how to surf, or whatever it is. Maybe I'm not going to run a marathon, but maybe I can run a 5K, and I think that's what's one of the coolest things about sports, is that if you're watching the best, it inspires you to do something athletic.
Yeah, without a doubt. It's always an inspirational thing. And I feel like the Olympics do put that inspiration out there. Every time the Olympics comes around, people watch sports they wouldn't normally watch. And then all of a sudden they have that fervor to get up and go. Now, I have to ask, before we go, you surf yourself. You've done triathlons. You're a runner, biker, swimmer, all these other things. Where would you put surfing's difficulty in terms of physical demandingness up against those other sports?
The physical demand, at least how I surf, isn't nearly as much as what it was to compete in triathlon. You paddle for a wave, you take 4 or 5 paddles, and then you're up and you're surfing, and then you paddle out, and it's all slow and just steady. So the physical demand is not quite as it's not quite as much. To be one of the best at it is just as demanding, though, of course. Otherwise, everybody would surf like Kelly Slater. But for sure, having to go out there and train 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 hours a day, that was very physically demanding. And it was something that I had to really monitor, because there was always more that I could think of doing in my training than I could actually do without burning myself out. And so I always had to be very tuned into when my body was strong or when I was pushing it too much and I needed to back off. If you get injured, you're not training. If you get sick, you're not training. And if you're not training, you're not getting fit. So I was always trying to just keep everything at a level where I was pushing myself, but only to a point where I knew that I'd still be able to wake up the next day and do something. And so it was and that's a fine balance. There were certainly times when I overdid it and I'd have to take a few days off and just regroup or whatever. But basically, I pretty much had 15 years with no serious injuries, no real burnout segments. But it was pretty demanding, I would have to be honest.
So, obvious words of advice from Mark Allen, if I'm going to paraphrase from you real quick. Young athletes, middle athletes, college, pro, old, doesn't matter. Train smart, do some yoga and meditation, get your mind right, and listen to your body. Probably the most important things that you could do, which I don't think any competitive athlete does unless you're at the top of your game, because then I think it clicks. I think those are the ones it clicks for. And you mentioned Tom Brady. Look at Tom Brady in TB12. When he laid it out, it's very similar to the things you're saying. Eat right, train smart, and just be at peace. Look at Tom Brady. He's the most relaxed guy on the planet right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's amazing.
Unbelievable. All right. But Mark, this was absolutely lots of fun. I really appreciate you coming on the show.
Thank you, Alex. It was great. I always enjoy these kind of conversations. So.
Yeah, it was so much fun. Again, that was Mark Allen. He's a six times Ironman Triathlon World Champion, voted the greatest endurance athlete of all time on a worldwide poll on ESPN in 2012, author of Fit Soul, Fit Body, 9 Keys to a Healthier, Happier You, and is a coach of triathletes all around the world, 50 different countries. Again, Mark, really appreciate it. Any plugs, anything you want to tell people so they can find you, things that you want them to look out for?
Yeah, you can, if you're interested in triathlon coaching, as you mentioned, Alex, markallencoaching.com. The book that Brant and I wrote, Fit Soul, Fit Body, 9 Keys to a Healthier, Happier You, is on Amazon. You can also go to fitsoulfitbody.com. I'm on LinkedIn. You can see stuff that I post quite frequently on Instagram, Mark Allen Grip, GRIP. And you know where to find me.
Yeah, and I do have to mention, I have been noticing on LinkedIn, if anyone hasn't connected with Mark yet on LinkedIn, please do, because you have been putting out different stories from your career. I think you're doing what is a 14-part that you are doing of stories on your career videos, and they're fantastic. So I recommend linking up with him and going to watch those because they are awesome.
Great.
And again, everybody, I'm Alex Cuesta, host, creator, Sports Opinions Podcast. Find me on Twitter and Instagram at @A_Cuesta30. Find Sports Opinions on Twitter at SportsOpinion30, Instagram, Sports Opinions 30. Go search for us on Facebook, like the Facebook page. And wherever you are listening to this, please do me the favor of putting up a great rating, giving us a great review. The better reviews, better ratings you give, the more people will get to hear amazing athletes and these awesome interviews that I have the pleasure of doing with so many amazing people. So once again, this was the Sports Opinions Podcast. Everybody, have a good one.